All right, today I am couldn't be more excited, to be honest, because not only do I personally use the product, but I am personally a huge fan of the man behind the product. Today I have Chris Vario, owner of Sunny Rose Ranch Honey.
Hey,
Chris,
Brian.
thanks for joining the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And this is actually really interesting because we're actually on location. You can see the bees behind us. So I apologize if the audio may sound a little windy or whatever, but there's no better place to do this. I hope we don't get stung. Um, but first question that comes to mind is why honey?
Honey's such um, a popular food. It's one of the only foods that never spoils. It's used for medicinal purposes. It has been for years. There's people. So I don't personally have allergies, but so many of my customers do, and they use it for allergy purposes at different times of the year. Wherever you go in the world, you can find a different variety of honey. If you're in Florida, you can get orange blossom honey. You can get saw palmetto honey, mangrove, uh, Tupelo honey. When you're here in Pennsylvania, you can get black locust honey, Japanese knotweed honey. So wherever you're at in the world, there's a different variety and nectar source that the bees are out there foraging on, and there's so many different types and flavors, and it's a great product.
That's awesome. It's interesting to hear how complex honey actually is. I said before this, I don't know much about bees, nor do I know about honey. But one thing that we did talk on before we started recording is your product line. And before I start asking some questions, for those people who are listening who might not know about your product at Sunny Rose Ranch Honey, why don't you tell them a little bit about your offering?
Okay, sure. So here at Sunny Rose, we have three different local sources of honey. In the springtime, which is where we're at right now, we have a black locust variety. It's a very light colored honey. Uh, it's a very similar to acacia honey, which is also very light. In fact, where we're sitting at under this tree, Brian, is a black locust tree. And in the springtime,
That's cool.
they have little white blossoms, and if the weather's right, uh, the bees will make a very nice honey crop out of those. And then come mid, actually right now we're in the middle of June. It's ready to harvest. Uh, we also have a wildflower variety, which everything else out there that's blooming right now or that has been, a lot of clover, a lot of dandelion, a lot of tulip poplar, a lot of the berry bushes that grow wild here. The bees are on all of that, and they're bringing it back to the hive. So you'll have a what would be considered a Pennsylvania wildflower mix of honey. It's very polyfloral, multiple flora included in that variety. And then in the fall time, you'll have the primary source, which would be Japanese knotweed or a goldenrod. This field is loaded with goldenrod, so there'll be the hives behind us. Probably half of them will be filled up with goldenrod. The other half of them will be filled up with Japanese knotweed. It's and then we when we harvest honey here, we separate the varieties. So, if some customer is looking for something very specific, we'll typically have that available for them. So when you are harvesting the honey and you're extracting it, which is a process that takes it out of the comb and into the jar, we look at the frame and we look at the color of honey and the taste of honey, and then we're able to separate the varieties and um, you know jar them up according to the variety.
Yeah, and that's kind of and make sure with being outside, I want to make sure we're picking up what you're saying because
Certainly.
there's stuff that you're saying is stuff that I would never hear elsewhere. Like this is getting down to the granular, which is fascinating. So with all that you just said, you bottle it, obviously. I know you have swag, I'm sure, shirts. But say some of the product lines that you actually sell. Obviously, honey in jars,
Correct.
but you have other stuff as well.
I do. Yeah, one of my most popular products is a wildflower honey that we've infused with dried chilies and habanero peppers.
That
It's a
sounds
spicy honey, and it is, I mean, it's excellent on food. It's used more as a condiment for whatever your favorite food is. I've used it on pizza. I've used it on sandwiches. I What I love hearing is from all of my customers. They're always telling me something something new that they're using the hot honey on, and I love hearing all of these different things. I was at a market this morning. A woman told me she's using it on Chinese food, and it's excellent.
Yeah,
So
you got me using it on pizza. I'm a ranch guy, but I started using your honey for pizza, which is the hot honey one,
yeah,
right?
it's
Yeah,
spicy.
yeah, it's really delicious. So that was gonna be one of my questions, like what could somebody put honey on that they might not think of? So that's pretty cool that you covered that. Now behind us is the bees. Any idea about how many you have? I'm curious. Obviously.
So a typical colony of honeybees is about 50 to 70,000, depending on um, if it's an older colony. It's if you see the tops of those boxes back there, the top two boxes are loaded with surplus honey that we'll harvest. Each one of those hives probably has about 50,000 bees in it right now,
Wow.
and those bees are going back and forth right now as we speak all day long, and they're out probably 2 to 3 miles from the hive foraging on all the local nectar sources that are within our area, and they're bringing the nectar back, and then they're the way honey is actually made is so bees have two stomachs. One would be for digestion. The other
Oh.
one would be for the transference of nectar and honey. So the bee will go to the flower, suck out the nectar into their honey stomach, bring it back to the hive, and then they will regurgitate that nectar into the mouth of another bee. During
Whoa.
this process, it's mixing with the enzymes in the bee's stomach, and they'll pass it around to each other probably about 4 or 5 times. Finally, they'll regurgitate it into one of the hexagonal honeycomb cells, and then it'll be just nectar. There'll be a process next where the bees will fan that nectar with their wings to dissipate some of the moisture content until it becomes very viscous, like honey, and then it'll be considered ripe, and then the bees will cap it with beeswax that they make from their own bodies, and then you have local honey.
That's great. Now, I'm gonna probably ask a lot of dumb questions.
No dumb
Does
questions.
like is there a time like wine, like when you bought a wine, right? You want to age it a little bit, and even that there's a cap, especially with reds. Um, is there a time from when you do that to when it's the best, like a prime part of honey, and does it expire?
You always want to wait and make sure that it's capped within the hive, and once it's capped, yeah, there's really no waiting time. You want to make sure that the moisture content's right. There's a device called a refractometer that you can test that moisture. A
Refractometer.
refractometer. You can test the moisture content to make sure the honey's not too thin, doesn't have too much moisture in it. If you have too much moisture in your honey, it could tend to ferment just by sitting there. So you want to make sure that it's just right and ready for bottling.
Another question that came to mind was, do you put honey after you open it in the refrigerator, or do you just leave it in the pantry?
No, my recommendation is that you just leave it at room temperature. When honey gets cold, it can cause crystallization to happen quicker. Some people do put their honey in the refrigerator, but you don't really need to. It's really meant as a room temperature item. The honey kept in the hive is it's probably 90 degrees inside the hive right now.
Wow.
So then and the honey's fine in there.
So I grew up. The only thing I really knew about honey was we put it in tea when we were sick. So this is great to learn
Yeah.
a lot more, especially we'll get into the business behind it. One thing that came to mind. So we rode a ATV up here to get up to where the bees are, and you can clearly see the bees swarming as you approach. And I was taking some video content, and I have to share a story. So I was at a friend of mine's house who has a property not too far from here, and he had some people over, and we were just casually outside drinking some wine, and he has three young kids, and two of them we were just walking around his property looking at plants like pots, and and all of a sudden I looked down, there was a little bee. I'm like, ow, it got me. And then I'm just like kind of like we're kind of oblivious, and I see his oldest boy take off running. I'm like, okay, kids are kids. So then he has his youngest, which is 4, I believe, at the time, and um he he's like playing on this something, and I looked down. And I looked down. And I kid you not, there was probably 10 bees on. I didn't see my arm. I saw bees, and I went into like fight or flight mode. I was like, oh my gosh, that's probably why, the oldest boy ran away. So I went and I grabbed the little boy, and we started running. All of a sudden, now he's like, ow, 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 ow. So I always go back to, what was it, My Girl?
Yes.
Kevin, with
Yes.
Macaulay Culkin. And I used to say, come on, they're bees. Get away. But I will say, for anyone who's ever thought that, when they swarm and attack, like, it was a thing. Yeah, it was quite a interesting evening at that household. But so as far as bees, how many times do you think you've been stung?
Oh, I get stung. I probably get stung every time I come in here, but it's my own fault. I've gotten comfortable around bees now, so I've relaxed my protective gear. So if I'm working in the apiary and I don't have gloves on, or I'm not wearing a full suit, you know, it could happen if I make a wrong, if I make it too quickly, quick of a move or something. But every maybe 2 or 3 times I go up into the apiary.
Yeah, I got stung enough.
I did want to back up here what you were telling me about the story. There are many different kinds of bees out there, and honeybees are typically a docile insect, and they're not the same bees that are living in the ground. They're not the same kind of bees that are usually flying around the trash cans going after the sugary drinks.
Okay.
Honeybees typically are out there doing a job. They're foraging, they're pollinating, uh, they're not so concerned about what we're doing unless we're swatting at them. And I guess that's an aggressive behavior. You can see there's bees flying all around us, and they really don't really care that we're even here.
There's just animals running around, bees flying. It's just up UnPack Insurance.
One of the things that I did want to mention to the viewers, Brian, is that right now here in the Northeast, we're in honeybee swarming season. Okay. And honeybee swarming season happens starting in May and goes to probably the first week of July. And it won't be uncommon for people in the community to see a huge cloud of bees just coming into their yard and landing on a branch. And then you have a ball of a basketball size of 5,000, 10,000 bees just hanging on your shrub. And when you see that happening, so I just want to make sure that people know to call a beekeeper as opposed to an exterminator. A lot of exterminators are now referring people to beekeepers if they come across honeybees. A lot of them are not exterminating honeybees. There's still people that are, but I've gotten more calls this year in my 12 years of beekeeping saying the exterminator won't do anything. They told me to call a beekeeper, which that thrills me to death because honeybees are so important to us as humans.
Are these the same bees that are like fighting extinct? Like
they're not.
I always read like bees are going away.
They're not extinct. They're not close to becoming extinct, but there is concern related to honeybees because of certain maybe pesticide use, habitat loss. Some other factors that tie into that. But bees are extremely important for pollination. There's people that ship bees all over the country, from Maine to pollinate blueberries, to California to pollinate almonds. And
that's cool.
Honeybees are very social and intelligent insects. And I just want to urge people that are listening to call a beekeeper to come if they have.
Would you be one of those people that they could call?
I am certainly one of those people. Okay. And if I'm not available, which because I do get a lot of calls, I can always get somebody in an area over the beekeeping network. We're a community as well, and we have contacts throughout Pittsburgh and the surrounding areas. So if I'm not available, I can usually find somebody who is.
And we will touch on this at the end, but just in case there's someone out there listening, what is the best way that they should contact you?
Well, I would say go to my website. My phone number is on my website. That's www.sonnyroseranch.com. And you can go on to there and get all
what's your Insta? Give this guy a follow.
Or my Instagram. It's at Sonny Rose Ranch, which is Sonny is spelled Sonny.
Yeah, And I obviously know the backstory,
Sure.
so I'm not sure if you wanted to share that, but it's a fantastic story. I wasn't BSing when I said I use your product, and obviously I'm a huge fan of you and the family. So I hope nothing but success for you and your endeavor.
Thank you.
Are these the type of bees when they sting they die?
Yes, yes. If they do sting you, they cannot dislodge their barb without pulling the inside of their abdomen out.
Ouch.
So you get that one sting, and they're done for. With the exception of the queen, she's the only one that can sting you repetitively.
So queen, once again I'm coming in this a little novice here,
That's
but
okay.
so a queen could just sting you a couple times.
Correct.
Wow. Okay, the queen bee.
Yeah. Most other species of bees, yellow jackets, wasps, hornets, all can repetitively sting you. Honeybees, once they sting you, they can't dislodge that barb from you, and then once you do, they're
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate. All right, so hopefully you guys can see behind this, and once again the wind's picking up, so hopefully all audio is good. Kind of walk us through how it gets from this stage where they're buzzing around our heads right now to picking it up off the shelf.
Okay. So when honey is ready for harvest, which it is ready for harvest right now, I go into the apiary and I take what's called a fume board, and a fume board is like a cover, like a lid for those hives that you see over there. I take that lid off and I put this fume board on there. The inside of the fume board is sprayed with an almond extract. The bees don't like that smell. So what happens is you put that cover on top, and all the bees that are in those top boxes go further down into the hive, into the lower two boxes. So what happens is those boxes empty out all of the bees in it. So then I take the entire box off of there, which has 10 frames of honey in there. And then I bring it back to my honey processing area. I take a hot knife and I cut off the wax cappings. I also put it into a radial extractor. I put those frames into a radial extractor, and then through centrifugal force, that radial extractor spins those frames around, and then the honey just slings out of the comb, and then it collects at the bottom of my centrifuge, and then it's put into I lightly strain it just to get out some of the large chunks of wax and bee parts that might come along with it, and then it's put into a bucket and set a food grade bucket, and then set aside for bottling. Whenever an order comes in, I bottle it up. I put it into my bottling tanks, and as orders come in, it goes out.
That's awesome. So I have zero experience doing that. I have done my family out in the Bay Area, California. They grow wine, small, like in their they have a little project. So I got to see that process mostly. You have said this is the season. We're so this is it. Is it, how often is that? Is it only every spring, or how often is I know the wine cycle, but what's the honey bee cycle?
Excuse me. In western Pennsylvania, we harvest honey twice a year. Once in the springtime. Well,
Grab water.
Yeah, give me a minute. Sorry.
I think he swallowed a bee. So I'll take this time just to say thanks for everybody who's listening. This will probably be the second episode that gets dropped on the YouTube channel. We're getting better every one. At least we're trying to. So I appreciate everybody kind of supporting us. And as we figure out audio issues, video issues, lighting issues. So just a big thanks for everybody. The goal for UnPack Pittsburgh is to unpack the people, the places, and the products in the Pittsburgh area, right? Pittsburgh area can be very big. I mean, heck, we'll go all the way to WVU if we have to, West Virginia. But I just really appreciate everybody's support, both on the project and everybody who's tuning in. So,
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. This is what it's all about right here. And we don't edit, by the way. We probably should, but I don't want to, because my goal for this podcast, and this is only a piece of the business, but it's to kind of just have a discussion, right? Like we're buddies. Like I said, we should have had whiskey before this, but I want people to listen. Like some of the stuff you're saying, including me, went right over my head, right? Because like you are a professional, this is your craft, right? So there'll be certain people that like just fall for you and want to support you and how awesome you're doing, and there'll be people who are in your industry who are going to learn and like kind of take it to the next level. So that's the goal of this. So go ahead. Do you remember where you left off?
I don't. What were we talking about?
Great question. Edit.
Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. So we were talking about the process of
of of
everything.
of honey. Okay, so we left off where we are bringing the honey back to the honey processing area, and then we cut off the wax combs with a hot knife. Then those frames of honey are put into an extractor that spins around through centrifugal force. That honey flies out of the combs and then gets collected at the bottom of the centrifuge, and then goes through a gate valve or a pumping system, and then gets bucketed into food grade buckets or barrels. And then whenever we get an order for whichever floral variety the customer wants, then we'll bottle that up.
I appreciate you because I think we repeated that.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm trying to focus. There's bees flying over your head. I might forget what we talked about. So then there was also the season. I compared it to wine versus the
Correct.
bees, and like when is the proper time. So like is this like the Super Bowl of it right now of the year?
We're going to be harvesting a big honey crop here in the next few weeks, and then another big honey crop in October.
Okay, so when you do your big honey crop, other than getting a ton of honey, obviously, which you can then turn into your product line, do you do anything to kick it off? Like, is there anything like the community can do to support you? Or like, I know you do farmers markets and events, and I know you're in a few restaurants if you want to give them a shout out too.
Yeah,
Like, talk about how after you get it, to how people who are watching and listening can help support.
Yeah, I think that coming out to farmers markets and purchasing from a local vendor at a farmers market is always helpful. There's a lot of other vendors other than myself at these things that are also, bringing premium products to the market and to the people in the community. I think it's also good to follow along on the person's social network, Instagram, Facebook group. That's always a good way. Um, and then also to like educate themselves about honeybees, and if they have questions, to feel free to call or ask. I get a lot of questions that come through my website. I have a question related to honey. I have a question related to bees. It's always a good thing for me to get those questions and be able to respond to somebody with the informed knowledge, as opposed to just hearing something from somebody that might not be totally accurate.
Yeah, this is your thing, so they should go to someone who knows what they're talking about. I know a little stuff that I won't say, but like plans for the future. Is there any like what might be some next steps coming? What should people look out for? Just kind of give us like what's on the roadmap.
Okay, well, there's always new products coming. I try to release 2 new products a year. This year it's been a strawberry spun honey, which has been very popular. We're in
That's cool.
strawberry season right now, and a cinnamon spun honey.
So real fast before you keep going, dumb question number 17 is: do you actually mix cinnamon and strawberry? Like when strawberry go?
Correct. They're 2 separate varieties. So what we do is, because you don't want to mix anything with water into honey because that can create bacteria, we get freeze dried strawberry powder, and we blend that in very slowly to crystallize honey, and it becomes like a silky smooth spread, and it's fantastic on fruits or yogurt or any kind of like cheese.
Yeah, it's amazing how talking to you when we were kind of driving, and you were talking about what people can put, like what people can use honey for.
Sure.
Like you were telling me like all kinds of like medicines, and there's some really big beauty companies now that are starting to get into that space, and it's just fascinating. It's so cool to see you have taken it. How long have you been doing this now?
12 years.
I was gonna say it's been a minute. So I mean, to see how it started, and to where it is now. When you pick the 2 products that you release a year, what kind of goes into that process?
I usually take about the questions that people ask me, through the year. Do you have this or do you have that? If it's something that I don't have and I keep getting repetitive requests for it, I take that into consideration. I send a mass text message to everybody in my family, a lot of my friends. Hey, what do you think about this? What would you like to see? And I just look at the recommendations and see which one has the most, and so that's one way I do it. Other ways, I look at what some of the other people might be doing. If it's something that I like, I might consider what would I do to make it a little different, or associate my brand with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool to see you develop your brand. Once again, like, I know what's behind the brand, so it's like, to me, it's a no-brainer how I want to support your products and you.
Thanks, Brian.
So I hope, like, your story of everything comes out, and it's just talking to you. I came here knowing I don't know a darn thing about bees and honey. But then I realized very quickly I really, really, really don't know a damn thing about bees or honey. So it's amazing how educated you are to not just do this like a fun side project, but like to commit yourself, because I know you have a full-time job.
I do. Yeah.
So like this is your second, this is your passion, and which makes it all, as an entrepreneur myself, it makes me want to root for you even more, because it's like,
Thank you.
it's like you're hustling, like you have a ton of hours at your full-time job, you have all your friends, your family, all that kind of stuff, and then you got to make time to do all this, and all that stuff you just said where 90% of it went over my head. That's a heck of a process.
I couldn't do all of that with the full-time job if I didn't truly enjoy this craft, or think that it was so important. So yeah, it's if you find something like that, then it's not really hard. It makes it a lot easier.
That's a good lesson to everybody out there. Cool. Well, we can wrap. I know you're super busy. Is there like biggest things for me is how anyone listen who's like, oh my gosh, Chris is an amazing person, which he absolutely is. Like, what can they do? Obviously, they can follow you on.
Follow me on Instagram. I'm trying to get my numbers up. I like to post on Instagram different things about honeybees, different products that I have. So yeah, following the Instagram. From the Instagram, you can get to my website.
Okay.
From my website, you can make any kind of purchase you want.
Okay. Yeah, and if you're a business out there listening to this, or you have a position of power from a company standpoint or business, and you could add a product like his, I would certainly encourage you, because like I said before, I use it and it is delicious. So hopefully, what is your status for getting into places? Like, is that you sell online, obviously, so e-commerce, then you sell at farmers markets, and then you're also in some restaurants and stores as well?
Yes, yeah, locally between South Hills here and Pittsburgh, you can find the products at the Country Store in Venetia, the V&V Scratch Kitchen in Finleyville, Daniel's Discount Hardware. I think everybody in the South Hills probably knows Daniel's. Yep. Trust Brewery in Pleasant Hills.
Yep, I've seen it there. He's a great guy too, so that's a cool spot.
There's a little store in Hazelwood called Dilamato's right on 2nd Avenue, and the Strip District. You can pick the product up at Raina's, Raina Foods.
Cool.
I'm probably missing one or two. I think there's the place in Squirrel Hill, which is the food shop on North Umberland.
Okay, cool. Well, hopefully after this there'll be a lot more, because you definitely deserve it. But one thing I will say before I forget is, like, if there's ever a time when you're doing the process and we could come out, maybe even Elena, who does our content, like, she could catch some stuff, and the process just sounds fascinating. And seeing it, like, you can't, like, we're in Jefferson Hills right now, right? Is it considered Jefferson Hills?
Jefferson Hills.
Yeah. And it does not feel like, I wish I could pan the camera around, because it feels like we are literally in heaven. It's absolutely beautiful. There are so many bees flying around. A little nervous. But hey, Chris, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Brian.
And
Likewise.
just one more time, just tell them where they can follow you.
On Instagram at Sunny Rose Ranch, and then that'll take you to my website, which is www.sonnyroseranch.com.
Awesome. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.